So it's been a while since I uploaded my last video, wasn't it? I'm sorry for not uploading videos for a long time. I'm really busy right now with a massive video I'm working on and also high school. Anyway, today I would like to talk about a show called Family Guy. Family Guy is an adult animated comedy made by a guy called Seth MacFarlane that first aired on January 31st, 1999. As a little kid, I never really had interest in Family Guy. In fact, I thought that it was just a bad version of The Simpsons. But after rewatching the series now, I can actually say that I was very wrong as a kid. I love the characters, jokes, episode plots, and some of the cutaway gags. Hell, after I watched the early seasons, I thought that I would actually prefer the modern Family Guy instead of the modern Simpsons. But I was wrong, since after I watched a lot of modern episodes, the show just didn't feel the same anymore. The characters became really dislikable as most of the jokes were unfunny and the episode plots just felt boring or even disturbing to watch. For a moment I even thought that I was watching two different shows, but how did this decline actually happen? Was it really that terrible, or it's just my stupid thoughts? Well, today I would like to talk about the show's decline with my friend Jeffy 2010. So take a seat, since in this video we are going to talk about every single season of Family Guy and see how it got worse. Here it is, the first season of Family Guy. This is actually the shortest season of Family Guy with only 7 episodes. Since this season has only 7 episodes, I would like to talk about most of the episodes from this season. This season started decently with an episode called Death Has a Shadow and got better with I Never Met the Dead Man. But again, I can't hide that this season had a lot of episodes like Chitty Chitty Death Bang or The Sun Also Rose that were weak. There's actually only one episode from this season that I considered being amazing, and that was Brian Portrait of a Dog. Don't get me wrong, this season isn't bad at all. In fact, I can even call it kind of a good season. The problem I have with this season is, again, most of the episodes were either weak or decent. I still think this season did a good job with introducing characters like Brian, Peter, Lois, Stewie, etc. Overall, this was kind of a good season, but sadly, ratings were getting lower from this point.
Mr. King dies.
Season 2 is, in my opinion, the peak of Family Guy's golden age. It has amazing episodes like Road to Rhode Island and my favorite episode of the entire show, Brian in Love. This is my favorite season of the entire show. The worst episode of the season is 15 Minutes of Shame. Not bad, just forgettable.
Back to back, and spin it on it back to back, on the turntables back to back, and spin it on it back to back, on it back to back, and spin it on it back to back, on the turntables back.
This is without a doubt my most favorite season of Family Guy. This season has so many great episodes, with one of the episodes being my most favorite episode of the show. Yes, I'm talking about Brian Valos and Peter Swallows. I love Brian Valos and Peter Swallows so much. It's actually one of the only Family Guy episodes that made me cry. I won't lie, there were some weak episodes like the kiss scene around the world and Ready, Willing and Disabled, but the majority of the episodes were great. Also, here's a fun fact: When You Wish Upon a Weinstein, which was the last episode of the season, actually made Family Guy cancelled. I don't know exactly why this episode got banned, but it's probably because of the episode being very offensive. And you know what? If the show ended in 3 seasons, it would be great. Sadly, that wasn't really the case since the show returned with Season 4. But before moving to Season 4, let's look at a movie that came out before Season 4. Here it is, the first and the last Family Guy movie made so far, Stewie Griffin: The Untold Story. Now before talking about this one, I'm not gonna talk about it for like 3 minutes like I do with my Disney videos, so I think a minute or less will be enough. This movie is considered amazing by most of the Family Guy fans. What do I think about it? I wouldn't call it amazing like most of the Family Guy fans think, but it's still good. The movie is basically about Stewie thinking that the guy from TV is his real father, only to find out that it's actually him from the future. The main problem I have with this movie is that it doesn't really feel like a movie and works better as 3 different episodes. I wouldn't call this movie bad, I just thought that it could have been way better. So yeah, let's move on to Season 4. Family Guy is back after getting cancelled. Hooray! They started the season with an episode called Norse by Norse Quahog, which I actually consider being amazing. This season has a lot of amazing episodes in my opinion. As already mentioned, there's Norse by Norse Quahog, which has a nice plot about Peter and Lois wanting to improve their marriage. Then there's PDV that has a fantastic song and a great message about censorship. Then there's Brian Sings and Swings that has a great plot about Brian becoming a musical duo with Frank Sinatra Jr. Again, I can't say that this season had no weak episodes. I wasn't a fan of episodes like The Father, The Son and the Holy Phones or Jungle Love. By the way, this is the longest season of Family Guy with 30 freaking episodes. Although I don't get why the last 3 episodes were basically 3 different parts of the Stewie movie. Anyway, season 4 is a great season, definitely feels like a good return after getting cancelled.
The last season of the Golden Era. It has great episodes like Stewie Loves Lois, Meet the Quagmires, Roll to Rupert, and Mother Tucker. And episodes I consider mediocre, like Bill and Peter's Bogus Journey. The Barbie song in the episode is annoying, and Lois having sex with Bill is terrible. Other than that, I like this season.
So season 6 is basically when the show started to get bad by most of the fans. Okay, I know that most of the people are going to disagree with me, but I actually liked this season. Sure, it's not as good as the last 5 seasons, but I really enjoyed most of the episodes from the season. This season had like 12 episodes and I only consider 7 of them being great. This season started really good with Blue Harvest, which is basically the first Star Wars parody with the Family Guy cast. But I can't deny that this season had like 4 bad episodes. Like, let me talk about episodes I considered bad from the season. There's a Moving Out, Brian's song, where Brian just acts very selfish towards Julian. Or let's take a Believe It or Not Joe's Walking on Air, where Joe starts to act awful towards his friends when he gets his legs working again. You know, I actually see no point in talking about every bad episode from this season since it's just going to take more time. Like I said, I really loved this season for all of the great episodes, but I also have to admit that this season had a few really bad episodes.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. The bird's a winner. Well, a bird, bird, bird. Bird is a winner. Well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a winner.
Season 7 is so weird. On one hand, I really like this season, but on the other hand, I really hate this season. The first 2 episodes of the season are a great example. This season started with an episode called Love Actually. An episode with a plot of Brian meeting a girl he really likes, but deciding not to make love with her on the first date, which leads to Cleveland making love with that girl, but it then suddenly becomes about Cleveland wanting to reunite with his old wife Loretta. Like, the plot is very lazy and the message is terrible. Now let's literally take the next episode of the season called I Dream of Jesus. The plot with Peter befriending Jesus Christ is really funny, and of course, how could I not mention the legendary Surfing Bird song. Like, you can obviously see the difference between these 2 episodes. If one tries to be way too serious and fails, the other one just doesn't care and stays funny, which manages to work. Yeah, if I had to describe this season, mediocre would perhaps be the best word. However, I can admit this. Some of these episodes' plots are becoming really boring, and some of them even manage to have disturbing moments.
Wow, the show really gone downhill here. A lot of the episodes are either mediocre or downright abysmal. The only episodes I like is Road to the Multiverse and Something 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 Dark Side. The worst of the season is the only banned episode of the series, Partial Terms of Endearment. It's basically awful to watch. Lois becomes a surrogate mother. I hate everyone in this episode, especially Peter. It's the worst episode of the entire show.
Dang it, this season is surely awful. I don't understand, to be honest. The first episode of this season, called And Then There Were Fewer, was actually freaking fantastic. The idea of the main cast being stuck in a mansion at night during the thunderstorm was great. Not only that, the first episode of this season was actually very interesting. I loved how they managed to have a lot of funny jokes, nice soundtracks, and even a great twist ending. So after watching the first episode of the season, I actually thought for some stupid reason that it might get better from this point. But as soon as I watched Boring Excellence in Broadcasting, all of my thoughts disappeared. I have a similar problem with this season that I did with season 7. Except if season 7 had a lot of great episodes and bad episodes, this season had a lot of terrible and boring episodes and only a few great ones. Also, I really have to mention how dislikable the characters are starting to get. There's literally an episode called 4 Affairs where Bonnie wants to cheat on Joe in France, or an episode called Brian Writes a Bestseller where Brian becomes famous with his new book and starts to act awful towards Huey. Really shows how worse his character is getting with time. Okay, it just can't get worse than this, right? Season 10 is considered as one of the worst seasons of Family Guy. I can definitely see why. If you didn't know, this season has my least favorite episode of the entire freaking show. I think I already knew which direction the season was going, considering they made 3 freaking episodes about abuse in a row. The first episode of the season, called Lottery Saver, was terrible for having the typical idea of how Peter and his family becomes rich, and because of that he starts to abuse his friends for money. There's literally a freaking scene of Peter shooting Joe in the eye. Then the second episode of the season, called Seahorse Seashell Party, is about Meg getting abused by her family. When Meg finally decides to stand up for herself, she decides to stay as a punching bag after her family gets sad, and we get a really terrible message about needing to stay with your abuser. And finally, my least favorite episode of the entire show, that is literally called Screams of Silence. The episode is about Quagmire's sister getting abused by her boyfriend and not wanting to leave him. This leads to Quagmire and his friends wanting to kill the abuser, which leads to some really disturbing scenes. We get a scene of Quagmire literally saying to his sister, "You can't call yourself a woman if you're getting abused." You know, I think I've talked about those 3 episodes so much that there's no point in talking about other bad episodes at all. This season isn't completely terrible, since there were some episodes that I found great, like Back to the Pilot, or very funny, like Be Careful What You Fish For. But I'll say this for sure, the show is starting to get really disturbing and unfunny to watch.
Mediocre season. The season opens with the Griffins climbing Mount Everest. The best of the season is Joe's revenge. It's weird how a fight with the Grinch doesn't make him handicapped. I kind of find that a little bit weird. Other than that, I like this episode. The worst being, Lois comes out of her shell. I hate Noah's here. It has some good episodes, some bad, but many of this season is just mediocre.
Oh god, you have no idea how much I wanted to talk about this season. This is the season that's considered as the worst Family Guy season by most of the fans. I really agree with this season being the worst. I personally think there isn't going to be a single Family Guy season worse than this one. If all of the previous seasons we've talked about had at least few good episodes, then you're probably gonna be surprised if I say that this season didn't have a single good episode. I'm not joking, none of the episodes from this season were actually good. This is obviously my opinion, as I'm pretty sure that some of you are going to find some episodes from this season being good. But I don't know, the best episodes of the season were just decent, with the rest being either mediocre, bad, or terrible. And by terrible, I mean really terrible. This season actually has my friend Jeffy 2010's least favorite episode of the entire show, which is Herb the Love Sore. Before I talk about that one, I would just like to talk about Brian. Brian's character became a complete garbage in this season. First of all, he died in an episode called Life of Brian and was brought back after 2 episodes. After he was brought back, his character just started to get worse. If in the previous seasons he was just a dislikable character, in this season he became a total piece of crap. In Brian's A Bad Father, he freaking manipulated his son only to become a writer on his show. And in Herb the Love Sore, he gave a disease to Stewie and Chris for no reason. I honestly don't know what to say at this point. Season 12 is without a doubt my least favorite season of Family Guy. Okay, so season 13. I can definitely say that this season is an improvement from season 12. As I already said, I don't think there will be a single season worse than that one. but at the same time, I can't call this season good either. This one is very similar to season 10, for having a lot of bad episodes and only a few good ones. But I actually consider this one slightly better than season 10, not because of the best episodes of the season. In fact, the best episodes from this season are nothing compared to Back to the Pilot or Be Careful What You Fish For. It's mostly for the worst episodes of this season. This season has a lot of episodes that I really hate. For example, we have an episode called Brian the Closer, where Brian loses all of his keys and gets help from Quagmire. This leads to Brian becoming a closer and needing to sell his shitty house to somebody, and because of that he decides to sell it to Quagmire, who actually helps Brian with his teeth. This episode is a good example of Brian's character getting even worse. We could also take Stewie's Inside, which is literally about Stewie wanting to improve his relationship with Brian and because of that making himself pregnant so they could have babies. The worst thing about this episode is the fact that some of the babies literally get killed in the end. This season is slightly better than season 10, but again that doesn't mean the season is good at all. It's like the third worst one in my opinion. At this point I can tell for sure that most of the episodes are really boring, disturbing, or just disgusting.
Boring is how I describe this season. The two episodes I hate are A Shot in the Dark and Road to India. A Shot in the Dark for Peter's a racist for shooting Cleveland's son. Yeah, I hate that one. And Road to India didn't feel like a road to. It feels like a Family Guy episode. The best of the season is Peter Normal Activity. I love this episode in my opinion. Other than that, the season is just boring. Most of the episodes are mediocre. As much I hate seasons 8 to 13, at least it gives me an reaction. This season is just boring in my opinion.
Season 15. I really don't know what to say about this one. Okay, so I have to be honest. This season wasn't nearly as bad as the last season. But the worst thing is that this season was almost completely boring to watch. You might say that it's better to have boring episodes instead of terrible ones, but for me, at least when some of the episodes from the last seasons were terrible, it was interesting to talk about them. But when most of the episodes from your season are just boring, there's nothing to talk about. The only episodes from this season I would like to talk about are the best and the worst episodes in my opinion. For me, the best episode from this season is an episode called Inside Family Guy. There's not much of a plot in that one, but if I had to describe it, it's basically showing us behind the scenes of Family Guy production. I really like that episode for just how creative and funny it is. Now let's take the last episode of the season called A House Full of Peters. The plot is about Peter having a lot of children that look exactly like him, and one of his children decides to date his wife. Like, some people may like this one for the jokes or for the creativity, but I don't know, I just found it really disgusting to watch. Nothing really else to say about this season. If the last season had many terrible episodes, this season mostly had boring and forgettable episodes. Okay, so season 16 has to be the most creative season yet. No, it's not said in a good way. The season still had some terrible episodes, but you know what? At least it wasn't completely boring to watch like season 15. I'll admit though, some of the episodes from this season were really boring. This season started with an episode called Emmy Winning Episode that's basically desperate about the characters wanting to win an Emmy award, despite the fact that they've actually won Emmy multiple times. And you know what? It was kinda interesting to watch. Again, this season was really creative. Some were really creative in a good way, and some were really creative in a bad way. Let's take this 300th episode of the show called Dog Bites Bear. The story is about Brian accidentally destroying Stu's bear, Rupert, and Stu wanting to spread Rupert's ashes on the mountain in Vermont. I love that episode for being really creative and having a charming scene of Stewie confessing that Rupert will always be with him while Brian is going to die one day. Now let's take an episode called Send and Stewie Please. That's one of the Family Guy episodes that I think could have been good but ended up being really bad. The story is about Stu staying in a psychologist's office for the entire episode and in the end not helping him while he's dying. I'll give it a credit for doing something similar to Brian and Stewie episode from season 8, but it just ended up being really boring. Anyway, a very creative season, but that doesn't mean the season is good. The show tries to be experimental, but some of the episodes are still really boring in my opinion.
shocking for how extremely unlikable Brian is, and is another example of how Brian became the main antagonist. The best of the season is Big Trouble in Little Hawk. After being teased by Brian, Stewie makes a shrinking machine that backfires with both will shrink to microscopic size. I love this episode. This is my top 5 best episodes of the entire series. This season is good. Lots of good episodes. Few mad and few bad episodes. But other than that, I like it.
Okay, I don't really have a lot to say about this season. I remember hating this season a lot and considering it as one of the worst Family Guy seasons ever. What do I think about this season now? Well, it still had some terrible episodes, but it's definitely not the worst. I don't like how this season started at all though. The first episode of the season is called Yak Rocky, with the family going on a cruise with Quagmire, Cleveland and Joe. The cruise eventually gets crushed in the storm, which leads to the family needing to survive. That episode sucks in my opinion, mostly for having boring plot with disgusting moments. And the worst thing is that the ending just doesn't make sense. They couldn't even write a proper conclusion to the episode. So after having an awful start, I had my expectations really low for the whole season, and maybe that resulted in me hating the entire season. Again, I can understand why I hated this season. Episodes like Better Off Meg, with Meg starting a new life after the town thinks that she died, and then returning to the Griffins. This season is similar to season 16, except if season 16 tried to be creative and had some really good episodes. This season had few terrible episodes and only a few really good ones. Again, I don't have a lot to say. This season was weak but not one of the worst seasons.
I like season 19, with the exception of the talented Mr. Stewie and Boys and Squirrels. This season is good. Terminator is already in my top 5 best Family Guy episodes of the series.
Here's a fun fact. I haven't watched a single episode from this season until making this video. I don't know, maybe it's just because I kinda lost my interest in Family Guy. Anyway, this season hasn't really ended yet, so I don't know what to say about it. So far only 11 episodes were made, and the 12th episode is going to premiere on February 27th, if someone is even interested in watching that one. I don't know what to say about this season. None of the episodes were actually terrible so far. In fact, there were some episodes in this season that I actually kinda enjoyed, like Christmas Crime, with Brian learning the true meaning of Christmas after destroying Mayor West's nativity scene. Even though I can't call that episode even close to being amazing. But I can't deny that there were episodes that I didn't care about and found boring, like the episode called Rock Hard, which is basically just 3 different stories about Muddy Waters, Jim Morrison and Elton John. Also, I just want to point out that they start to use Doug's character way too much in this season. They made like 5 episodes with him in this one season, and the worst thing is that his character isn't even good. He's boring in my opinion. This isn't a bad season at all. Again, I don't find a single episode in the season being terrible, but at the same time I have to admit that they're really running out of ideas, as most of the episodes from this season are just boring to watch. Family Guy was a great show. It's really weird for me how the show got worse with time. As I already said in the beginning of the video, at one point I had a feeling that I was watching 2 different shows. The first 5 seasons were definitely the golden age of the show, with having a lot of great or even amazing episodes. But slowly the show just started to get worse. If some of the characters like Brian were really likable in the early seasons, as the time went they start to get more dislikable to the point of becoming absolute garbage. I really liked Family Guy. Even seasons 6 till 7 were actually pretty good. But right from season 8 the show just started to use dark humor more. Eventually the episodes just became boring, disgusting or even disturbing to watch. As a person who really liked the show, I can say for sure that it really has to end at this point, since the writers are really running out of ideas, as most of the episodes are just boring to watch at this point. Also, this might not seem as an actual downfall video since we were mostly talking about each season, but I decided to do something in my own way. By the way, you might ask when the show actually got bad, and I couldn't give a proper answer to that question, since everyone has their own opinion about the downfall of the show. Also, Jeffy 2010, how would you describe Modern Family Guy in your own way?
I say season 8 to 13 is where the show got really downhill, but slowly the series starting to get a little better over time. Right now, season 20 is actually great in my opinion.
Thanks for your opinion, Jeffy 2010. By the way, I forgot to mention that this video is inspired by SKO's Downfall of SpongeBob video, so link to his channel in the description. Also big thanks to Jeffy 2010 for helping me with this video, link to his channel in the description. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and share your opinion about the video in the comments below if you want to.